Alright everyone, well this week I thought we'd do something pretty cool using the brush engine and creating natural brushes from actual photographs. And here I have a photo of various kinds of leaves, obviously. And what I'm going to do is actually use this first one and go ahead and create a brush out of it. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and drag with my lasso tool and just select this particular brush. Now you can see I just did a very loose selection around the outside area here, and to narrow or to isolate the selection just to the leaf, I'm going to take my magic wand tool, and inside that selected area I'm going to hold down the option key to give the little minus symbol in there. And if I click in that white area, it's going to remove that selected, or the white background area, and pretty much snap the selection right to my object. So you just got to create the selection around your object, and then just option click or alt click right inside that white area, and it'll snap right to the edge of your graphic. So with that object selected, here was I'm going to do. Go ahead and remove the color information by pressing Shift Command U. That would be Shift Control U on a Windows machine. And with it still selected, when we're going to create a brush inside Photoshop, the darkest areas of the brush are going to be the most opaque or the most dense when you're using the brush tool. So we're actually going to bring up my levels and actually darken this up. I'm going to grab the dark slider here and just kind of push it in a little bit, or quite a bit, so we can get a nice dark area there. And let's maybe take this gray slider and push it outward a little bit. So just making that whole area darker, but we can still see the lines a little bit. And then we'll click OK. So obviously we've got this object still selected, so we're going to go into the Edit menu and now choose Define Brush Preset. And we'll just call it Leaf 1. So that's pretty much done. My brush is set. So let's go ahead and minimize this document. And here I've got a new document set that we're actually going to paint these leaves into. So let's go ahead and grab our brush tool and let's modify the brush itself a little bit. So it should be the very last brush in the brush panel. So there it is right there. And if we drag into the document, there's a preview for it. But before we start painting, we need to change a few things about this tool. First of all, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. I'm going to use my left bracket and just nudge that down a little bit to about 100 pixels or 100 points. So I'm going to open up my brush engine by clicking on this small icon here in the options bar, and let's change up a few things about it. So if I paint right now with this brush, this is what it's going to look like. It's just straight and symmetrical, and that's not how leaves naturally look. So I'm going to first activate the shape dynamics, and let's highlight that and open up that. Now the first thing I'm going to do is take the size jitter here and push it all the way up to 100. And I'm going to go ahead and leave my control set to pen pressure because I am in fact using a pressure sensitive tablet. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that setting on. But I'm going to go down here and change the angle jitter. I'm going to take it all the way up to 100, and you can see it scatters the rotation in all different directions there. And I'm also going to take the roundness jitter here and push that all the way up to 100. So it kind of distorts them and bends them back in space, so it gives a little bit of dimension there. Now I'm going to activate the scattering. So let's click on that, check on that. Let's highlight that, and we're going to activate both axes, and I'm going to take it pretty high up to around 600%. And you can see what's going on inside the preview here. This is what we're going to get when we apply it to our document. So we're going to get a pretty good result there. And I'm going to go back into the brush tip shape here and just kind of increase the spacing a little bit. Let's take the spacing to about 50. So spaces it out a little bit more, almost look like it's going to be a falling leaves effect. And we can always modify this after the fact. So we've got that brush set. So what I'm going to do here, just in case this works out, I'm going to go ahead and save this as a preset brush. So let's go ahead and call this new leaf brush. Now earlier we named it when we actually created the brush. Now we're naming it because it's a brush preset with all these settings applied to it. And this is going to come in handy here in just a moment. So I've got that brush preset. Let's go ahead and close that window up. I'm going to go ahead and create a new document. And I got to change one more thing, is the colors that we're going to paint with. Well, obviously we're not going to paint straight black leaves. That wouldn't look very good. So we're going to go here and click on that foreground swatch, and let's get a really kind of red color there. So we're going to go with some fall colors here. It's very similar to the ones we were using. In fact, if we wanted to, since I didn't close that document, we can open this back up and let's just sample the colors of these leaves. So maybe we'll sample this red color in here, and let's just flip that and bring the foreground color and maybe sample this yellow color here. So we've got those two colors sampled. Let's go back into our document. And with our brush tool, In order to be able to paint with both the foreground and background colors, we're going to go back into those brush options and activate right here the color dynamics. And when I highlight that, notice the very first setting here, we have foreground and background jitter. And what that does is as we paint, it's going to alternate between painting with the foreground and the background color. So I've got it set all the way to 100%. And I'm going to go ahead and leave the control off so it just does it consistently. And now let's see what we've got. So I'm going to zoom out here. Now, if I just start brushing, you can see it does do a pretty cool effect. But here's what I want to do. It's spacing it out a little bit more than I want it to. So let's go back in there, back into the brush tip shape, and let's take the spacing back down to 25%. And in the scattering, I'm going to actually increase the count from 1 to 2 because I want a little bit more dense leaves going on there. So let's close that and do a quick stroke and see what we've got. All right, so it's very much better. Now, in order to do this effect that I'm going to do, I need to be able to reapply the same exact stroke that I'm going to apply. So if I go in here and just randomly brush and I want to do another effect, I'm not going to be able to recreate that exact stroke. So what I'm going to do is actually use the pen tool. And I'm actually going to use the freeform pen tool here. So with that freeform pen tool, I'm just going to go into my document. I'm just going to make sure we're drawing the path, actually. Not a shape tool, but a path up here in the options. And I'm just going to go in here and just really crazy, just zigzag and randomly draw a path here. Maybe I'll get a nice whoop out there. So just a really scattered, crazy path or line path going on there. So let's take our direct select tool and drag and select that entire path, and let's go into the paths panel. And notice we've got a work path here. Well, what I'm going to do is go into the flyout menu here and go to stroke path and make sure we're using the brush. And when I do that, watch what happens here. Click OK. It adds all those brushes and kind of a cool scattering effect there. But now, like I said, I want to be able to reapply that same stroke, but I'm using a different brush. So if I deactivate this, notice we've got the leaves and all the colors are there. It's kind of looking flat, not really looking realistic in the color and everything like that in the shading. So with that same path, I'm going to go over here and select my burn tool. And then we're going to go in here and choose that preset brush that we created. Let's go into the brush panel, brush presets here, and select that very same scatter brush we just created. And this time we're using the burn tool here, which is a little hand. So let's take this and select that same path. And on that same layer, we're going to go in here and choose, well, actually inside the paths panel, and choose stroke path. But instead of the brush this time, we're going to use the burn tool right down here. And when I click OK, watch what happens. It's doing that same effect, but I'm going to go down here to the bottom of the paths panel and just click this second icon in it, and that will reapply that same brush. If I do it several times, it's not just shading overall like a regular brush would. It's using that same scatter leaf brush and giving me a much more realistic effect there. So if I click it several times and then deactivate the path, look how what we've got here. Looking much more realistic and a lot better than what we had before. You notice we had the very flat colored leaves, which you can kind of still see over here, but notice the texture inside here. It's used that scattered leaf brush to kind of enhance the texture and get a nice, dense, really kind of cool shading in here. So it's being able to not only create the brush from a real photograph, but then being able to go in here and then stroke it on a path and then being able to reapply it. Not just painting the pixels or painting the brush, but then painting it back onto it with the burn tool to enhance the shading a little bit more. So it's a way to get much more realistic brushes from real photographs. So try it yourself, and don't just try it on leaves. Try it on all the different kinds of things. But hopefully you can start to see the real power of the brush engine here inside Photoshop.